The wind howled across the frozen plains of Varelles like a chorus of lost spirits, its icy fingers clawing at everything that dared to stand upright. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, swallowing sound and sight alike beneath a suffocating blanket of white. In the heart of this desolation, trudging through knee-deep drifts with numb fingers clutching the frayed edges of his thermal cloak, was Joran Vale, a human explorer from the distant colony of Helios Prime, stranded after his scout skiff had crashed during a sudden ion storm. His breath came in ragged puffs of vapor, his lips cracked, his eyes bloodshot from exhaustion and cold. He hadn't seen another living soul in 3 days, not even a native icehopper or skymoth, just endless white, silence, and the gnawing fear that he might die alone in this alien wasteland. Then, through the blizzard's veil, he saw them. At first, they were just shadows, huddled shapes pressed against the lee side of a jagged obsidian outcrop. But as Joran drew closer, squinting through frost-laced lashes, the figures resolved into something both startling and heartbreaking. 3 small children, their skin the soft lavender of twilight clouds, their hair a cascade of snow-white strands matted with ice. They wore tattered cloaks far too thin for the brutal cold, their bare feet blue with frostbite, and kneeling before them, shielding them with her own body as best she could, was a woman. She was tall, even crouched low, her frame lean but strong, her purple skin marked with faint silver scars that shimmered like constellations under the pale glow of Varelles's twin moons. Her white hair, long and wild, whipped around her face like a banner of surrender. Her eyes, wide, luminous, and the color of amethyst, locked onto Joran the moment he stepped within 10 paces. There was no fear in them, only a desperate, raw plea. Joran stopped. Instinct told him to be cautious. Varelians were rumored to be reclusive, sometimes hostile to off-worlders. But the sight of those children, shivering and silent, hollowed out his caution like a rotten log. He slowly unslung his pack, movements deliberate, and knelt in the snow. "I mean no harm," he said, his voice hoarse from disuse. He didn't know if she understood standard, but he spoke anyway. "I have food." The woman's breath hitched. She didn't move toward him, but her eyes flickered to the pack, then back to his face. One of the children whimpered, a tiny, broken sound that cut through Joran like a blade. The woman flinched as if struck, then turned to press a kiss to the child's forehead, murmuring something in a language that sounded like wind chimes and falling ice. Then, without warning, she scrambled forward on her knees through the snow until she was just an arm's length from Joran. Her hands trembled as she reached out, not to take, but to clasp his gloved fingers in her bare ones. Her skin was freezing, but her grip was fierce. "My children haven't eaten for days," she whispered, her voice rough but clear, accented but fluent in standard. "If you feed them, I'll be yours forever." Joran stared at her, stunned. He'd expected gratitude, maybe tears, but not this. A vow offered like a sacred debt, spoken with the gravity of a queen swearing fealty. He pulled his hand gently free, not out of rejection, but to open his pack. Inside were nutrient bars, emergency rations, a half-frozen flask of broth, and a small heating coil. He handed the bars to her first. "Take these. Give them small bites. Don't let them eat too fast." His voice was calm now, the medic training kicking in despite his exhaustion. He'd been a field medic before becoming an explorer, and old instincts never truly died. The woman nodded, tears freezing on her cheeks as she broke the bar into tiny pieces and fed them to the smallest child, a girl with wide, curious eyes. The other 2, boys barely older, watched with ravenous hunger but didn't snatch. They waited. That discipline, in such desperation, told Joran more about their upbringing than words ever could. While they ate, Joran activated the heating coil, placing it between them to radiate gentle warmth. He draped his spare thermal blanket over the group, ignoring the bite of cold on his own shoulders. Only then did he ask, "What's your name?" "Lariah," she said, not looking up from her children. "And these are Kalen, Riven, and little Mira." She touched each child's head as she named them. "We are of the Siltheri clan, once noble, now exiles." Joran didn't ask why. Not yet. Survival came first. But as the children began to relax, their shivers easing, their eyes losing that glassy edge of starvation, Lariah finally looked at him fully. Her gaze held a mixture of awe and sorrow. "You are not like the others," she said softly. "The off-world traders who come here, they see us as curiosities. Or worse, slaves. They take what they want and leave us to freeze. I'm not a traitor, Joran replied. My ship went down north of the glacial spine. I've been walking south, hoping to reach the settlement at Frostreach. Laraya's expression darkened. Frostreach is gone. Burned by raiders 2 weeks past. The off-world mercenaries. They came for our cryovanes, the ice mines beneath the city. They took everything. Killed anyone who resisted. Her voice cracked. My husband, he was among them. Joran felt a chill deeper than the snow around him. Frostreach had been his only hope. Now it was ash. Before he could respond, a low, guttural growl echoed from the ridge above them. Joran's hand flew to the plasma pistol at his hip. Laraya stiffened, pulling her children close. From the swirling snow emerged 3 hulking shapes. Gorvathi ice wolves. Their fur matted with frost, eyes glowing red with hunger. These weren't natural predators. They were cyber-augmented beasts, likely left behind by the raiders as hunting animals. Their jaws dripped with acidic saliva, their limbs reinforced with crude metal plating. Stay behind me, Joran ordered, rising to his feet. His pistol whined as it charged. But Laraya didn't obey. Instead, she stood, placing herself between the wolves and her children, her hands raised. To Joran's astonishment, she began to sing. A low, resonant hum that vibrated through the air like a tuning fork. The wolves paused, their heads tilting, confused. The Silthari, Joran remembered from old xenology texts, were said to possess harmonic resonance abilities, able to influence certain fauna with sound. But the wolves shook off the effect quickly. One lunged. Joran fired. The plasma bolt seared through the beast's shoulder, sending it yowling backward. The other 2 charged. He fired again, but the second shot went wide in the blinding snow. One wolf leapt at him, claws extended. Laraya screamed, not in fear, but in fury. She snatched a shard of obsidian from the ground and hurled it with impossible precision. It struck the wolf's cyber eye, sparking violently. The creature howled and veered off course, crashing into a snowdrift. Joran used the opening to fire twice more. Both shots found their mark. The wolves collapsed, twitching, then still. Silence returned, heavier than before. Panting, Joran turned to Laraya. She was trembling, but her eyes burned with defiance. You fight well, he said. And you feed well? She replied, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. A rare combination. He almost laughed. Almost. But the reality pressed in. No Frostreach, dwindling supplies, wounded children, and raiders roaming the wastes. They couldn't stay here. We need shelter, he said. Somewhere defensible. Laraya hesitated, then nodded toward the east. There is a place. An old observatory. My people built it centuries ago to study the stars. It's buried now, mostly, but the lower levels are intact. Warm enough. Hidden. Joran helped her gather the children. Mira clung to his leg, her tiny fingers gripping his pant leg like a lifeline. He lifted her gently into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. The journey to the observatory took hours. The storm worsened, visibility dropping to mere feet. But Laraya navigated with uncanny certainty, guided by memory or instinct. Finally, they reached a mound of snow-covered stone, half swallowed by the glacier. A narrow hatch, rusted but functional, led downward into darkness. Inside, the air was still and dry, warmed by geothermal vents deep below. Faint bioluminescent moss lined the walls, casting a soft blue-green glow. The chamber was circular, filled with ancient consoles and star charts etched into crystal panels. Dust lay thick everywhere, but it was clean, safe. Joran set Mira down and immediately checked the children for frostbite. He applied medgel to their feet, wrapped them in blankets, and heated water over a portable burner. Laraya watched him, her expression unreadable. You're a healer, she said finally. Was, he corrected. Now I'm just surviving. She stepped closer. Why help us? You could have walked on. No one would have known. Joran met her gaze. Because once, when I was a boy on Helios Prime, I was lost in a dust storm. A stranger, a Velnian trader, found me, gave me water, carried me home, never asked for anything. He shrugged. Kindness is a debt we pay forward. Laraya's eyes shimmered. Without a word, she reached out and touched his cheek. Her fingers were warm now. Then let me repay it, she whispered. Not as a slave, not as a prize, but as a partner. If you'll have us. Joran's heart hammered. This wasn't just gratitude. It was trust. offered freely, in a world that had shown her only cruelty. Before he could answer, a metallic clang echoed from above. Then another. Footsteps. Heavy. Armored. Laraya's face went pale. "They've found us." Joran extinguished the burner, plunging them into near darkness. He motioned for Laraya to take the children deeper into the observatory. He stayed near the hatch, pistol ready. Minutes passed. Then the hatch groaned open. Snow spilled in, followed by the silhouette of a man in mercenary armor, black plating, red insignia of the Iron Fang Syndicate. A raider. "Smelled the heat," the man sneered, scanning the room with a thermal scope. "Come out, pretty things. We've got buyers for exotic pets." Joran didn't hesitate. He fired upward, the plasma bolt striking the raider's visor. The man screamed and fell backward into the snow. But more voices answered from outside. Shouts. Orders. They were surrounded. Laraya appeared beside Joran, holding a slender staff carved with runes. "There's another way out," she breathed. "Through the lower archives. Leads to the ice caves beneath the glacier." "Go," Joran said. "I'll hold them off." "No," she said firmly. "We go together. Or not at all." He looked at her, at the determination in her eyes, the love for her children, the quiet strength that had carried her this far. He nodded. They moved quickly. As the raiders rappelled down into the observatory, Joran triggered a hidden console Laraya pointed to. Ancient mechanisms groaned to life. Sections of the floor slid open, revealing a spiraling stairwell descending into darkness. They fled just as gunfire erupted above. The ice caves were a labyrinth of glittering tunnels, lit by veins of phosphorescent minerals. The children, though exhausted, kept pace, trusting their mother and this strange human who had given them food and warmth. Hours later, deep within the glacier, they found a hidden chamber sealed by a crystalline door. Laraya placed her palm on a sensor, and it glowed violet, then opened. Inside was a small sanctuary, beds, preserved rations, weapons, and a communication array. "This was my family's refuge," she said. "My ancestors hid here during the Great Purge." Joran examined the comms unit. "It's still active. Weak signal, but maybe I can patch into a relay." As he worked, Laraya tended to the children, singing softly to soothe them to sleep. Mira curled up beside Joran, her tiny hand resting on his boot. Finally, the comms crackled. A voice, human, military, came through. "Any survivors from Scout Team Theta? Respond. This is Captain Renly of the ISS Wayfarer. We're conducting search and rescue in Sector Varellis 9. Joran grabbed the mic. "This is Joran Vale, Theta Lead. I have 4 survivors with me, 3 children and 1 adult female, Silthari. We're in the subglacial caves beneath the old observatory. Copy that, Vale. Hold tight. We're en route. TA 40 minutes. Relief flooded him, but Laraya's face was grim. "The Wayfarer," she said. "I've heard of them. They're not rescuers. They're bounty hunters, working with the Syndicate." Joran's blood ran cold. "How do you know?" "Because," she said, her voice trembling, "my husband sent a distress call to them before he died. They never came. They sold his coordinates to the raiders instead." Above them, the sound of drilling echoed through the ice. They were breaking through. Joran looked at Laraya, then at the sleeping children. He thought of Helios Prime, of dust storms and kindness, of debts unpaid and promises unspoken. He made his choice. He disabled the comms, then turned to Laraya. "Tell me everything you know about this glacier. Every tunnel, every weak point, every secret." Her eyes widened. "You're going to fight them?" "No," he said, a grim smile touching his lips. "I'm going to bury them." Together, they rigged the cave with charges from the sanctuary's arsenal, old seismic destabilizers meant for mining. Laraya knew exactly where to place them to trigger a controlled collapse. Joran synchronized the detonators with his wrist comm. When the raiders finally breached the chamber, they found only empty beds and a single note pinned to the wall with a knife. "You should have brought more wolves." The explosion was deafening. The glacier groaned like a waking god. Tons of ice sheared away, sealing the entrance, and the raiders, forever. In the aftermath, silence returned. But it was a different kind of silence. Not empty, not hopeless, full of breath, of heartbeat, of possibility. Days later, when the storm finally broke, Joran and Laraya emerged from a hidden vent on the glacier's southern slope. The sky was clear, the twin moons casting silver light over the snow. In the distance, the faint glimmer of a true rescue ship, unmarked humanitarian, hovered near the ruins of Frostreach. But Joran didn't rush toward it. Instead, he turned to Lariah, who stood with her children beside her, their faces no longer hollow with hunger, but alight with fragile hope. "I don't have much," he said. "No ship, no home, just a name and a promise." Lariah stepped forward, taking his hand in both of hers. Her touch was warm, steady. "Then let us build something new," she said. "Together." Mira tugged at Joran's sleeve. "Will you be our father?" she asked, her voice small but clear. Joran looked at her, then at Kaelin and Riven, who watched him with cautious eyes. He knelt, meeting them at their level. "If you'll have me," he said. Lariah's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they didn't freeze. They fell like rain in a desert, precious and life-giving. And as the rescue ship descended, its lights cutting through the lingering mist, Joran knew he wasn't just saving them. They were saving him, too. The rescue ship that descended from the bruised twilight sky wasn't humanitarian after all. Its hull bore no insignia, but the way it hovered silent, predatory, like a hawk circling wounded prey, sent a chill through Joran that had nothing to do with the snow. Lariah's grip on his arm tightened instantly. "That's not a relief vessel," she whispered, her voice taut. "It's a reclamation skiff. They're after Silthari bloodlines." Joran frowned. "Bloodlines?" Before she could answer, the ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss, and 3 figures stepped out. Not in mercenary armor, but in sleek, silver uniforms trimmed with violet piping. Their faces were obscured by translucent visors, but their movements were precise, almost ceremonial. At their center stood a woman taller than Lariah, her purple skin deeper in hue, nearly indigo, her white hair braided with threads of glowing crystal. A circlet of black ice rested on her brow. "Lariah of House Silthari," the woman intoned, her voice resonating with unnatural clarity across the frozen plain. "You are hereby summoned before the matriarchal tribunal for crimes of exile, concealment of royal lineage, and unauthorized reproduction." Lariah went rigid. Her children clung to her legs, wide-eyed and silent. Joran instinctively stepped in front of them, his hand hovering near his pistol, but he knew it would be useless against whatever tech these people wielded. "Royal lineage?" Joran asked, glancing at Lariah. She didn't look at him. Her voice was barely audible. "Mira, she's not just my daughter. She's the last living heir of the Silthari star bloodline. The matriarchs thought the bloodline extinct when they executed my sister, the true heir. But I took Mira and fled before they could claim her for the cradle." "The cradle?" Joran pressed. "A genetic vault," Lariah said, eyes still locked on the approaching woman, "where they harvest embryos, erase memories, and raise heirs as obedient vessels. No family, no love, just duty." The indigo-skinned woman stopped 10 paces away. She removed her visor, revealing sharp, ageless features and eyes that held galaxies of cold calculation. "I am Vela, High Warden of the Matriarchal Guard. You have evaded justice long enough, Lariah. Surrender the child, and the offworlder you will be interrogated, then memory wiped. Your interference is noted and punished." Joran's mind raced. These weren't raiders or bounty hunters. They were something far worse. The legitimate authority of this world, cloaked in tradition and cruelty. And they saw Mira not as a child, but as property. "No," Joran said, louder now. "She stays with her mother." Vela's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. How quaint. A human believes he can defy Silthari law. She raised a hand. From the skiff, 2 floating drones emerged, humming with restrained energy. Neural suppressors designed to paralyze without killing. But Lariah moved first. She grabbed Joran's wrist and slammed his palm onto a small, smooth stone she'd pulled from her cloak, a relic from the observatory sanctuary. The moment his skin touched it, the ground beneath them shimmered. A pulse of violet light erupted outward, and the snow around them melted upward, forming a swirling dome of liquid ice that hardened into transparent crystal in seconds. They were sealed inside a geodesic shelter, humming with residual energy. "The Heartstone?" Lariah gasped, leaning against the wall. "It responds to Silthari blood, and to those bonded by oath." Joran stared at his palm, tingled faintly. "Bonded by oath? When I said, 'I'll be yours forever,' it wasn't just words," she said, meeting his eyes. "In our culture, such a vow, spoken in desperation, witnessed by starlight and snow, creates a soul link. The Heartstone recognized you as kin. Outside, Vela struck the crystal barrier with a sonic mallet. It rang like a bell but didn't crack. They can't break in, Lariah said. Not quickly, but they'll call reinforcements. We have minutes. What do we do? Joran asked. There's one place even the matriarchs fear to tread, she said. The hollow glacier, the tomb of the first matriarch, buried beneath the ice maw. It said her spirit guards it, and only those pure of intent may pass. Pure of intent? Joran gave a dry laugh. I'm just a stranded explorer who handed out protein bars. You fed starving children when you had nothing left yourself, Lariah said softly. That's purer than any ritual. She led them through a hidden fissure behind the crystal dome, a narrow tunnel that sloped steeply downward. The air grew colder, but strangely still, as if time itself had frozen. Bioluminescent fungi lined the walls, casting eerie blue shadows. After what felt like hours, they emerged into a vast cavern. At its center stood a monolith of black ice, carved with spiraling glyphs that pulsed faintly. Before it lay skeletal remains clad in tattered royal robes. Some ancient Silthari queen, long dead. But what made Joran freeze was the figure standing beside the throne. Not a ghost, not a vision. A human, tall, lean, wearing a tattered Helios Prime uniform decades out of date. His face was weathered, his beard streaked with gray, but his eyes sharp, intelligent, weary, locked onto Joran with impossible recognition. Joran Vale, the man said, voice rough but steady. Took you long enough to find us. Joran staggered back. Who? How do you know my name? The man smiled sadly. Because I've been waiting for you. My name is Darian Vale. And I'm your grandfather. Silence crashed down like an avalanche. Lariah gasped. The children huddled closer. Joran's mind reeled. His grandfather had vanished during the early colonization wave over 60 years ago, declared lost in the Outer Rim. He was a myth, a footnote in family history. You've been here? All this time? Darian nodded. My ship crashed here during the First Contact War. The Silthari saved me. I fell in love with their healer, Lariah's great-aunt. We had a daughter. Your mother. He looked at Lariah. Which makes you distantly related by blood, yes. But more importantly, it makes Mira not just Silthari royalty. She's also part human. That's why the matriarchs want her. They fear hybrid blood will dilute their purity, or awaken something they can't control. Joran's knees nearly buckled. His mother had never spoken of her father. She died young, taking secrets to her grave. Now, standing in an alien tomb beneath a glacier on a frozen world, he learned he wasn't just an outsider, he was part of this place. The Heartstone didn't just accept you because of Lariah's vow, Darian said gently. It accepted you because your blood already sings the old songs. Outside, the crystal dome shattered. Shouts echoed down the tunnel. Vela and her guards were coming. Darian turned to the black ice monolith. There's one last test, he said. The first matriarch's trial. Only a true heir, or a true guardian, can awaken the glacier's heart. If you succeed, the ice itself will rise to defend you. If you fail, he didn't finish. Mira stepped forward, tiny but resolute. I'll do it. No, Joran said firmly. It's too dangerous. But Lariah placed a hand on his shoulder. She must. It's her birthright. Tears in his eyes, Joran knelt and kissed Myra's forehead. Be brave, little star. Mira walked to the monolith and placed both hands on the ice. She closed her eyes. Nothing happened at first. Then, slowly, the glyphs began to glow brighter. The ground trembled. From deep below, a low, resonant hum filled the cavern. A sound like a planet breathing. But then Vela burst into the chamber, plasma rifle raised. Enough! She fired not at Mira, but at the monolith. The shot struck true. A crack splintered through the black ice. The hum stuttered. Mira cried out, falling to her knees. No! Joran lunged, tackling Vela just as she aimed again. They crashed into the skeletal remains, sending bones scattering. The rifle skidded away. Lariah scooped up Mira, cradling her as the child sobbed. She's failing. The link is breaking. Darian staggered to the monolith, pressing his own hands to the fracture. Then we complete it together, he shouted. Joran, your blood. Give it. Without hesitation, Joran slashed his palm with his knife and pressed it to the ice beside Myra's handprint. Lariah did the same. Darian joined them. 3 bloodlines, human, Silthari, and hybrid, merged on the ancient stone. The glacier roared. Ice surged upward like liquid fire, forming walls, spears, shields. The cavern reshaped itself in seconds. Vela and her guards were encased in translucent tombs before they could scream. The very mountain became a fortress. Silence returned. Mira opened her eyes. They glowed faintly violet. "It's awake," she whispered. Darien sank to his knees, exhausted but smiling. The prophecy said a child of two worlds would awaken the sleeper ice and end the matriarch's tyranny. Joran helped Lariah to her feet. She looked at him, tears streaming freely now, but they were warm, thawing the frost on her cheeks. "You're not just their guardian," she said. "You're their father, in every way that matters." Above them, the ice ceiling parted, revealing the star-strewn sky. Not the twin moons of Varelles, but a new constellation, one that hadn't been there before. 3 stars, intertwined. And far in the distance, a different ship appeared on the horizon. This one bearing the golden sigil of the Galactic Concord. Human and alien diplomats, responding to Joran's earlier distress call, unaware of the storm they were flying into. But Joran knew now. This wasn't just a rescue mission. It was the beginning of something larger. A bridge between species, a new family, a legacy written in ice and blood and kindness. He took Lariah's hand, Mira clinging to his other side, Kalen and Riven behind them, and Darien leaning on his shoulder. Together they stepped out of the tomb, not as fugitives but as founders. The snow still fell, but it no longer felt like an ending, felt like a blank page. The arrival of the Galactic Concord envoy changed everything, not with force, but with witness. When their sleek silver cruiser descended onto the newly calmed glacier, its ramp opened not to soldiers, but to diplomats. A human ambassador from Helios Prime, a Silthari elder from the neutral ice clans, and a bioethicist from the Unified Sentient Council. They had intercepted fragmented transmissions, Joran's original distress call, Vela's authoritarian orders, and finally, the resonant pulse of the awakened glacier heart. What they found was not a battlefield, but a family standing together in the snow, surrounded by ice that shimmered like living glass. Vela and her guards remained encased, not as prisoners, but as symbols, proof of an old order crumbling under the weight of its own cruelty. The matriarchal tribunal, once thought unassailable, fractured within days. News of Myra's existence, and her hybrid heritage, spread like wildfire across Varelles. Many Silthari, long silenced by fear, rose in quiet rebellion. Others wept with relief. The Starblood line wasn't lost. It had simply chosen love over duty. Joran was hailed as a hero, but he refused medals or titles. "I just fed some hungry kids," he kept saying, though everyone knew it was far more than that. He'd given them dignity, safety, a future. Lariah, once an exile, was invited to sit on the newly formed Council of Clans, a body dedicated to rewriting Silthari law with compassion at its core. She accepted, but only on one condition, that Joran stand beside her, not as a consort, but as co-guardian of the people. And so, beneath the twin moons of Varelles, in a meadow carved from the receding glacier where spring dared to bloom for the first time in centuries, they were married. The ceremony was simple. No grand palace, no gilded thrones. Just friends, children, and the wind carrying their vows across the thawing land. Darien Vale walked Lariah down the aisle, his eyes bright with pride. Kalen and Riven served as ring-bearers, their earlier shyness replaced by proud grins. Mira, now strong and laughing, scattered petals of frost blossom, flowers that only grew where kindness had melted the deepest ice. Joran wore a tunic woven from human cotton and Silthari silk. Its threads dyed the soft purple of dawn. Lariah's gown shimmered like starlight on snow, her white hair braided with living vines that curled gently around her crown. When they clasped hands, the heartstone, now embedded in a pendant around Myra's neck, pulsed warmly, as if blessing their union. After the vows, the feast began, not with rare delicacies or imported wines, but with shared bread, stew made from glacier herbs, and the last of Joran's nutrient bars. Now a joke among them, toasted over the fire like sacred relics. Laughter rang louder than any war drum. Even the Concord diplomats joined the dance, clumsy but joyful. In the months that followed, they built a home, not in the ruins of Frostreach, nor in the cold halls of Old Power, but in the valley between the glacial spine and the whispering pines. They called it Alarion, meaning where two rivers meet. Their house was modest, warm stone walls, wide windows to catch the light, a garden where earth tomatoes grew beside Silthari moon melons. Inside, toys littered the floor, Wooden wolves carved by Joran, crystal puzzles gifted by elders, storybooks read aloud every night. Children came, as they always do when love is deep and peace endures. First, a daughter Senna, with Joran's stubborn chin and Laria's violet eyes. Then twin boys, Torin and Elian, who inherited their mother's harmonic voice and their father's knack for fixing broken things. Mira, now a big sister, taught them songs that made the frost blossoms bloom early. Kalen trained as a sky scout, mapping safe routes through the mountains. Riven became a healer, blending human medicine with Silthari resonance therapy. Darian lived to see all of it. He passed peacefully on a summer evening, his hand in Joran's, his final words. "You didn't just find your family, son. You rebuilt a world." Years turned. The glacier heart, once a weapon, became a wellspring. Its energy used to warm homes, purify water, and power schools where human and Silthari children learned side by side. The old hatreds faded, replaced by curiosity, then friendship, then kinship. On their 10th anniversary, Joran and Laria stood again on that same meadow, now dotted with wildflowers and the laughter of 8 grandchildren. Snow still fell in winter, but it no longer brought fear. It brought sledding, snowfort battles, and evenings curled by the hearth, wrapped in blankets, telling stories of the time a hungry explorer met a desperate queen in the storm, and chose to feed her children instead of walking away. They never ruled. They never sought glory. They simply loved, protected, and nurtured. And in that quiet, steadfast love, they built something rarer than empires. A true peace. So it was that Joran Vale, the stranded explorer with nothing but a pack of rations and a weary heart, found not just survival, but belonging. And Laria, once alone and hunted, found not just safety, but joy. Together under alien stars that now felt like home, they lived. Not forever, because even the happiest lives must end, but long enough. Long enough to see their children thrive. Long enough to know their love had changed the world. And long enough to fall asleep each night, hand in hand, knowing that tomorrow would be gentle. Years passed like falling snow, soft, steady, and full of quiet joy. Joran and Laria built their home in the valley where ice met pine, raising their children with stories of storms survived and kindness shared. Their house echoed with laughter, the scent of baking bread, and the hum of Silthari lullabies sung in human tongues. Mira grew into a wise young woman, bridging 2 worlds with grace, while Kalen and Riven became guardians of the new peace. Senna, Torin, and Elian played beneath frost blossom trees that bloomed every spring, their roots fed by melted glacier tears. The heartstone rested in the hearth, no longer a weapon, but a warm, glowing reminder of vows kept. Darian's chair sat empty now, but his memory lived in every act of courage and compassion. The matriarchal tribunal was replaced by a council of elders, healers, and dreamers, human and Silthari alike. Frostreach rose again, not as a fortress, but as a city of libraries, gardens, and open gates. Travelers came from across the galaxy, not to conquer, but to learn how enemies became family. On clear nights, Joran and Laria walked hand in hand beneath the twin moons, their white hair catching starlight. They never spoke of destiny or prophecy, only of soup left on the stove and boots left by the door. Their love wasn't grand or loud. It was in the way he stirred her tea just right, and how she saved him the last piece of pie. They grew old not in silence, but in shared glances that held lifetimes. When their grandchildren asked how it all began, they simply said, "With a meal offered in the snow," and that was enough. For in that simple act, feeding the hungry, seeing the unseen, they had rewritten fate. Now, wrapped in warmth, surrounded by those they loved, they knew true victory wasn't in battle, but in bedtime stories, mended socks, and peaceful mornings. And so, under alien skies that felt like home, they lived happily ever after, not as legends, but as family.